Hello everyone, welcome to Preterist Papers. This is the 62nd discussion in this series, and it's titled Satan and Job. You can find this 2-page printable fact sheet at preteristpapers.com. In Preterist Papers 60 and 61, we found the word Satan, usually interpreted to mean the superhuman adversary of God, is in error. The word Hasatan means the adversary in Hebrew, and construing it to be a proper noun is not accurate. Consequently, when we quote the book of Job in this paper, we corrected the passage using Satan to read the adversary, similar to Young's literal translation. We have underlined the words the adversary to signal this change. A2. We found in Preterist Paper 58 the sons of God were of the Seth lineage who endeavored to honor God. They were in contrast to the Cain lineage, who were carnal, violent, and disregarding of the divine will. A3. The sons of God presented themselves before the Lord in Job. This phrase, presented themselves before the Lord, is found elsewhere in the Bible pertaining to people gathering in worship or an attitude of listening for guidance. Joshua gathered the tribes together, and they presented themselves before the Lord. When the children of Israel asked for a king, God told Samuel to gather the people together to present themselves before the Lord. These were not heavenly divine councils, but rather earthly assemblies. Jesus transcended literalistic understandings by using parables. Parables express spiritual truths using a concrete narrative. The prologue and epilogue of Job have some parable-like characteristics. For example, take a look at B1 and 2, where tens and multiples of tens are used. Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters, adding up to 10. They all died, and Job was restored the same configuration of children. Job's assets were multiples of 10 and exactly doubled in his restoration. In B3, there were 4 single servants who escaped each of the 4 catastrophes visited on Job. These 4 servants announced the very same phrase each time, "And I alone have escaped to tell you." By the 3rd servant, one can imagine listeners to the story of Job chanting along with the storyteller, "And I alone have escaped to tell you." In addition to these characteristics, the extensive use of anthropomorphism gives a parable-like ring to the prologue and epilogue. Take a look at number 4. As Yahweh coming to agreements with a rather unsavory character who wanted to undermine Job's faith. But there's a strange confusion about who is doing the deeds. Is it the adversary or Yahweh inflicting Job? In section C, we point out some rather remarkable similarities of the adversary in Job to the character of Cain in Genesis. Number 1, both mingled with the righteous, but were distinct from them. Number 2, both were wanderers, seeming to suggest they were aimless and lacking in purpose. Number 3, both Cain and the adversary were reported to have left the presence of God. This seems significant. Number 4, both desired to inflict harm on those who pleased God. Number 5, both Cain and the adversary were covetous and steeped in grievance against Yahweh. Instead of contrition when his sacrifice was not accepted, Cain jealously decided to kill his brother. Similarly, Job's adversary, after surveying the ways of the world, was filled with grievance about God's favor of Job, and he was determined to make Job so miserable he would curse God. This is the desire of a wicked soul. It's worth noting the adversary is not mentioned at all after chapter 2. In D, Job never considered that anyone was responsible for his trouble other than Yahweh. In this he pleased God. His 3 friends dishonored God and were condemned, however, for insisting on their religious dogma that Job was afflicted because of his sin or due to outside evil entities. But Job was upbraided by God for his arrogance in part E. Job thought his mind could grasp the ways of Yahweh. His vision was limited, however, unable to comprehend the goodness of God in his suffering. His experience of Yahweh up to this time had been one who made his path prosperous, wise, and respected. However, he was far too limited in his knowledge of God. He needed the surrender that occurs when thrown completely on the need to acknowledge God's wisdom in all things. When we regard God as the giver of all things, there is a sweet presence, even in suffering. In the end, and through his extreme affliction, Job won his soul's desire to see God, to be so stripped of his own will that he was virtually subsumed into Yahweh's will, and his suffering was transformed. Job came to understand, not just intellectually, Yahweh does all things, and his ways are wonderful. Paul agreed when he wrote, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God concerning you." Please don't believe us or anyone else, but prove all things with the help of our Heavenly Father.